Hey guys, this is Baileywiki, and I'm kind of excited about this session today. A lot of you have been with me for a long time on the YouTube channel, and a lot of you on Patreon. And we're getting up to a Patreon milestone of our 2,000 Patreon subscribers, and we just passed like 6,000 on YouTube. So I'm really happy with what we've been able to build with this community, and certainly what I've been doing, but all of the stuff that I've been doing and the stuff that you guys have been following on, it really wouldn't be possible without Foundry, right? And that's the VTT of choice that I use in my live game, that everyone in our community uses. And Foundry's just opened up this ability to be a little bit crazy and do stuff I never really thought was possible. And so I thought, what better way to sort of get ready for this milestone than to do a session here with Atropos. Also goes by Andrew, but he is the fearless leader behind Foundry VTT, and he's the reason that we have this platform that is this big playpen for us to break stuff and make amazing experiences for our players. So, hey, Andrew, how you doing?
Hello, I'm doing really well, and thanks so much for inviting me to join you for this. I was really excited to hear about your upcoming milestone. That's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And yeah, I love getting the chance to hang out with creators in the community who are doing amazing stuff with the software, and you are certainly amongst the forefront of that group. So yeah, I'm excited to just sort of talk shop and celebrate your milestone a bit.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna have to ask you, and you can be honest here. I do tend to break things. I am pushing some of the boundaries of what's possible and what things were designed for. And I'm a little bit unapologetic about it, but at the same time, I'm sure you guys have, been on this wild ride with me. What's my reputation? Am I like, John the Baptist, the madman with the hair shirt screaming in the wilderness and doing crazy stuff? Or do you guys sometimes enjoy watching some of the nutty things that come out of my brain?
Yes.
Both.
That's great. No, I think I think we really enjoy it, and you don't have your reputation for pushing the limits of what Foundry can do is well earned and well deserved, and I'm glad that there's people doing that. I think that's one of the key ways that the software A gets better, and B, has proof of concept of what it can do. And that pushes us to add new features. When we see community members doing stuff like that, it also pushes content creators to think differently about what kinds of content can they make to use the platform to its greatest effect. And I think if you don't have people who are at the frontier of kind of pioneering that space, then you won't end up with some of the really cool things that have been developed as a consequence of it. And a lot of the things, and just to keep going a moment, a lot of the things that are at that frontier of content creation or development for Foundry are things that like we definitely want to do more with. And they're things that like the reason they're on the bleeding edge, so to speak, is not because we think they're bad ideas. It's because we haven't had time to create them yet as part of the core software. And community creators are sort of getting out ahead of us and kind of scouting that terrain before we get a chance to do it ourselves. So these aren't really things where we look at it and say, oh man, we never wanted our VTT to be used that way. We look at it and we say, that's awesome. We really wish everyone could have that functionality without needing to have necessarily like the secret recipe of the right combination of modules and technical know-how of how to do it. We want to make those sorts of tools easier for everybody, but that's a process that takes time.
Yeah, well, we appreciate it, and we appreciate how you architected the system to allow those of us who want to experiment and create some of these proof of concepts to be able to do that. And then we've seen those things get pulled into Core Foundry, and it's such a cool moment to have it sort of been part of developing some of this stuff, and then to see it come into the core, and then like you introduce something that becomes core, like foreground tiles, and also we take that and we build the next thing on top of that, right? And so like even what we're looking at here, I don't know, can you tell people what we're looking at here? You had some hand in this.
Sure. Yeah. I guess I had a modest hand in this. I DM a weekly campaign for Rime of the Frost Maiden. It's a pretty fun adventure. There's an interesting location in that campaign that's sort of a stranded pirate ship that has been lost in the sea of moving ice, and it's been totally encased in ice, and it's become icebound. And there's different ways to play that, and there's obviously like content in the written adventure that suggests how you would play that out, but I kind of jazzed this location up a little bit with some sort of homebrew additions in my game. And so I wanted more of a setting for my players to explore and to have some cool combat encounters and to get into kind of some trouble with. So I needed to make a map for the frigate that was trapped in the ice. And I started down my normal routine of starting to make a map from scratch. And I was like, oh man, it's just going to take forever to make a big ship. Wasn't there someone who made a really beautiful ship with like nice looking assets a while ago? Maybe I'll just repurpose that. And I remembered it was you, and I tracked down your galleon that you posted. And so, you know, you had all of the different sort of deck plans of the ship, although in your version, it was all kind of nice and new and pristine and like ready for sailing on the high seas. And I was like, I need the crappy zombie infested, horrible, broken, icy version of it. So I had to do a little bit of work to kind of basically just, you know, destroy what you had so lovingly made. But that's how this came to be. And then this was a version of your galleon that I ended up using for that encounter. And it went well. I think it was a really fun little mini chapter of the game.
Well, I like that you just dropped a giant block of ice through my beautiful deck. You know, but I loved it. So, you know, when I saw it and you were working on it, I was like, oh, that's great. That's a really cool version of the galleon, because the galleon is meant to be like a base for players to take over and sail the seas on. But how does it start? Like, where do they find it? You know, are there different versions that they can take over? So when I saw it, I was like, oh, this would be great. Oh, this would be great with FX Master clouds rolling through it, making it feel really cold. Oh, this would be great with all the new Foundry lighting, you know, really jazzing it up. So I said, hey, could I take this? Could I steal it back from you and then actually give it back to the community? So that's one of the things that I'm going to be releasing here for free to the community as we're getting near our milestone. Is we'll be releasing the Icebound Galleon, you know, the thing you and I unintentionally created together. But I'm really excited about it because
our unintentional collab.
Our unintentional collab. Yeah, exactly. But it's, you know, it's levels. It's all the stuff that I like doing in one map. So I'm pretty excited about that. It's so anyway, so that's a thing. And I thought, what else did I want to show you? I have the manor. I don't know if you've seen this. I'm just showing you crazy stuff that I've been doing because I don't know how much you pay attention to what I do, but
yeah, you know, I follow along a bit, but I also kind of, my nose is always quite close to the grindstone. And so often I am not the first to learn about something cool that's been created, but I have seen this.
Oh, you have? Okay, good.
It's a great manor house, and it is definitely a location that I would love to subject my players to at some point if I have the opportunity.
Good. Well, then you know that I built this. It's like transforming right now. Like I just clicked a button and the whole manor is now transforming into, you know, what is essentially a blank version, right? And
interesting. I hadn't seen that. That's cool.
So this is like Monk's active tiles primarily driving this, but it's like changing walls on different levels, and it's changing lighting and tiles and stuff. And it just tickles me, like, you know, to bring because I'm going to bring my players into this and let them conquer the ruined version and then make their own base out of it. And like, this is, you know, driven by modules, but they're all underpinned by what you've been able to put together with Foundry. So anyway, I just wanted to show off, like, this can get really crazy, the stuff that we're building. And I couldn't be more excited about it. Feels like a renaissance of VTT right now. And I just can't imagine that, you know, any of the other platforms are really doing something quite this outlandish. Hopefully everyone's innovating constantly, but you've really created a good space for us.
Yeah, thank you. And that's great to hear. And I think that, there were some features added in V9 that can help with this. There will definitely be some features added in V10 that I think can help kind of push things along. And then I am particularly excited for some things going on beyond that are things that you've demoed a couple of their functionalities, but things like support for multi-level, like native support for multi-level scenes, native support for transition points between different levels or between different locations. That type of stuff it's been functionality that I've been really excited to make for a while, but the timing hasn't quite been right, because we always think really carefully about like, what's the most critical thing for us to work on next. And we haven't been able to really say, yes, that's it yet. But at some point, and I hope some point soon, that will be something that I can't wait to make as a core part of Foundry. My mind has been kind of very active on this for a while about like how I would intend to do it. And so I have a lot of the mental design work already done, but it's just a matter of figuring out the right time to actually do the construction of those sort of infrastructure and that framework.
I hope you brought maybe some things to show us today, or just to kind of preview for us, because I can make you one promise: I will definitely try to break whatever you build. Anything you put out there that's levels orientated, or any of the stuff that you guys do. The lighting was amazing. So yeah, looking forward to that. So yeah, let me kind of turn it over to you, and let's kind of unpack some things first. For those who aren't maybe familiar with Foundry, I've got people on my sub that do Dungeon Draft and other things.
Yeah.
What just like basically what is Foundry? Why is it, it's a VTT, maybe, what is that basically? And then how is it maybe different than other VTTs out there?
Yeah. So for the folks that aren't maybe currently Foundry users, Foundry Virtual Tabletop is a self-hosted application that lets you play tabletop role-playing games in an environment where you have all of these sort of beautiful, immersive storytelling tools. You've shown a number of those tools that are visually very beautiful. We also certainly have tools for establishing the auditory landscape of the story you're telling, with music and environmental audio and sound effects and things like that. Certainly including different, characters, actors, tokens that your players can interact with and encounter, running combat encounters, managing all of the dice rolling. It's a software that basically allows you to build adventures and to run adventures for role-playing games, and have a ton of storytelling tools at your disposal for doing that. And it is a self-hosted software. So unlike some other options in the VTT space, you host Foundry yourself on your own computer, or you can host it in the cloud if you run like a remote server, or you can use one of our hosting service providers who can host like a dedicated server for you. And so there's lots of ways to host it, but fundamentally it is a program that you are running yourself and hosting yourself. And a consequence of that is it really sort of puts you in control of your own ecosystem and your own environment. You're the owner of your own data. You have all of your artwork, you have all of your music, you control how it's organized, you can choose which modules to install that extend the functionality of the software. And that dimension, the modularity of it, is one of the kind of crucial points of what Foundry VTT does, because it's a software that's designed using modern web technologies, which makes it relatively easy for community developers to extend and add all kinds of crazy new functionalities, because it's built in a framework that lets you use HTML and JavaScript and CSS and all of these technologies that lots of developers are comfortable working with. And it lets you use those technologies to create functionality for playing role-playing games. So I think there's a really amazing kind of sweet spot there where there's lots of people that have those skills. There's lots of people that love role-playing games. There's lots of people that, you know, are kind of at the intersection of these spaces and can do all kinds of crazy things like build different levels or monks active tiles or, you know, special effects, you know, weather layers and more functionality like that. And so, that's kind of an overview of what Foundry is at its core. Is it provides the base software and it provides a framework for allowing modules and systems to do all these sort of things. It is system agnostic. So we support, I think now we're up to, I don't know, around like 180, maybe even more, getting close to 200 different game systems that you can play on Foundry VTT.
No kidding.
And probably getting close to around 2,000 modules. I think I'm going to check the actual numbers right now and see where we are.
I think I'm using half of those myself.
Not quite 2,000 modules yet. We're at 1,360 modules, still a prodigious number. But we're at 190 game systems now, which is pretty incredible, to diversity of games that can be played. You know, we're always growing and expanding the core software. So I didn't mention that it's a licensed software. So it's a one-time purchase. If you purchase the software, you kind of own it indefinitely and you get access to all our future updates. And we are updating it a couple times a year. So we're always working on kind of the next big new version. And we just released a couple months ago, stable version 9, and the team is hard at work on version 10 and a bunch of new things that's going to bring to the table. So
yeah, I'm already seeing that I need to keep up with you guys here.
Just bug fixes. There's a good batch of bug fixes though that you can get.
All right, good. So that's been one of the remarkable things I've noticed here over the last, gosh, it's been, you know, a couple of years now that I've been on Foundry, is the velocity at which you guys are developing. And then you have the velocity on top of that of the module development. There's constantly something new to pick up, a new thing we couldn't do yesterday kind of thing. And it's just been a delight. But to your point earlier, you can keep it simple. You can get into Foundry, keep things simple, not install modules. And it's just a really, you know, great performant platform right out of the gate. But then of course you can jump down the rabbit holes that I lead people down, and you can do some of this crazy stuff. So what's coming up? What should we look forward to here?
Yeah, absolutely. So each time we tackle a new major version of the software, we choose a couple of sort of hallmark features that we make as kind of the major cornerstones of that new version. And one of those features is always chosen by the community through a vote on our Patreon page. And the winning feature for this next version of our recent Patreon vote is what's called Journal V2. And so maybe you can show on your end a little bit of what the journal can currently do in terms of, you know, creating folders and entries and making notes and documenting things about your world. And it's useful. It has, you know, a number of powerful features in terms of formatting text. You can put in images, you can put in HTML, you can do some nice things with the journal. But this is kind of one of the like first generation systems that is one of the few sort of first gen systems that's still remaining in Foundry, in that most of our systems have gone through a couple of rounds of iteration where they've gotten, you know, shiny new features and functionality updates. The journal has not. It has good features, but it is not as feature rich as we would like it to be, or that we think it could be. So one of the key things with Journal V2 is that we're going to do some very exciting things to make the journal system much better. Some of those things that we're planning to do is improvements to the editing experience with some new editing functionality that I think people will really enjoy, improved ways to bring different types of media to the table, much more emphasis on organizational tools for your journal. So journal entries that have multiple sections, journal entries that have internal navigation, journal entries where you can link to specific sections of a journal entry, journal entries where you can have more of sort of a table of contents, but then also maybe a sort of chapter where multiple journal entries are navigable in a collective set.
Because that's the storytelling layer on top of the VTT, is how we pull journals in. So yeah, it's been relatively basic, but I mean, that sounds amazing. And I have to assume you've seen some of like the modules and things out there as proof of concepts of like kind of where people are gravitating to, and it, know, you're kind of pulling in, some of the great ideas, like you have a history of doing, and just kind of taking core Foundry and then you always have some kind of innovation that I had never thought of, that I've never seen. So you well, yourself
hopefully we are able to blend honoring the work that our module developers have done by taking some of the very good ideas that have been prototyped and implementing them in kind of, we always put our own spin on it. Like we always kind of do things our own way, revisiting some of the design decisions and making sure that it's all kind of internally consistent with the rest of our code base. But a lot of those ideas that are, great ideas for how to improve journals that exist within the community, a lot of them are ones that we look at and we internally think about, how can we incorporate that into our own desires for what a journal system would do. And yeah, so I'm really excited for that to come together. I think the way that we've phased it is that the journal work is going to come in the second phase, the second round of prototyping of V10 that we're working on. Currently, we're just concluding the first prototype release for V10. And so we haven't started work on Journal V2 yet. What we have been working on a lot is some of the major infrastructural enhancements that are coming in this version. So that's a little bit less shiny and a little bit more boring. But I can show a couple of things in a minute that are in there that are a little bit more kind of user facing. And then in addition to journals, we have a lot of plans for continued improvements to token vision. So that's something that will be much more sort of shiny and fun to play with, in that we're going to hopefully, although we're not completely committed to it since it wasn't our voted upon feature, but we're hopefully going to add some new functionality for vision modes in V10, which will allow, much like an individual light source can be kind of have like an advanced configuration with lots of levers and sliders that can configure how a light source works.
Right.
We're envisioning having a sort of advanced configuration for tokens with vision, which can customize how their vision functionality looks, and then also mechanically how it interacts with other facets of the scene. So this would allow us to have core support for things like a rule where your character can perceive dim light as bright light, or a rule where your character can see as grayscale in areas where there is no source of illumination, or a rule where you have night vision goggles on and everything's kind of glowy and green. So there's that's kind of a very fun and sort of hopefully immersive storytelling aid that we're hoping to build that will allow different tokens with different characteristics of their perception to perceive the scene in a different way, with custom vision shaders and custom interaction of that with light sources and things like that. So that's a tough task, but we're building some fun stuff there, and I think it's showing some great promise.
I love it. I mean, that's huge for those of us who play these games and want to be able to give that kind of experience to the players. Of course, it's going to break stuff, like modules. Probably. Yeah. And then, we're going to go through that, but it's so worth it because it just keeps leveling up. At the end of the day, I think we're all just GMs that want our players to like us, even though we're bitter about it. And, but it's like, can I wow them next time we do a session? And you've been able to deliver that. You said you had some stuff to show us. You want to flip over to your machine and
Sure. Yeah. Let me give a kind of little disclaimer, because we are working on the first prototype of V10. So a lot of the more kind of user-facing work is not done yet. This is a lot of sort of mechanical foundational work that's been in progress. But yeah, I'll be happy to show a couple of nice little things that I can demonstrate. Let me go to share my screen here. Although I think I'll need you to stop for a moment. All right, there. Hopefully that is coming through now.
I got it. I'm seeing a hexagon.
Yeah, this is another sort of prison map. Hey,
is this one of your maps, by the way?
It is. Yeah, it is one of the ones that I've made.
I never knew this about you until later, and maybe others don't realize that you're actually a very great map artist and have done some amazing and continue to do some amazing work there.
Thanks. It's something that I've always enjoyed doing, and I think that my fondness for trying to create battle maps is something that predates my desire to create a VTT. So, I've always liked the idea of making maps to explore, and in some ways, creating Foundry has given me even more of a vehicle to indulge myself as rationalizing keeping that as a hobby.
I love it, and I understand it very well.
So a couple of things I can show, and maybe I'll just, this might not be the best map for it. I might switch to a different one. But we have a couple of new lighting features that didn't quite make it into V9, but that we did finish in time for V10. And so lighting is always a popular thing amongst folks that want to make Foundry as beautiful as possible. I can show a couple of those real quick. So any light source like this one that we have, now under its advanced options, if you recall, currently in V9, there's sort of a checkbox for whether the light source is gradual, has a gradual fade or not. We've replaced that with a linear attenuation setting. So that allows the light source to be more or less gradual on a non-binary scale.
Fantastic.
So that's something that's pretty nice, that if you want a light source that ends very sharply at, oops, that's luminosity, not attenuation. If you want a light source that ends very sharply at the edges, you can do that by dropping the attenuation all the way down. Maybe it's easier to see with a darkness source, actually. But if you want it to be much more gradual, you can make attenuation higher and accomplish that as well. So it gives you more fine-grained control over how much drop-off there is in the light source.
Love it.
So that's a nice little feature. Another feature that I think I really love is we have currently a torch animation that gives sort of a nice flickering light and is good for anything that is sort of like a flickering lantern or an open flame.
Yeah.
One of the things I don't love about that in current Foundry is I think that it doesn't quite depict fire all that well, because the center of the flame animation is not intense enough. And so we have now a new flame animation, and you can see it on these torches where the sort of intense flickering right where the actual fire of the torch is located is much more intense. And you can control how large that bloom is with part of the animation intensity.
Fantastic.
Of the animation type. And so for things that's like an exposed flame, this improved torch animation looks really, really great. And for those of you who are
you're almost giving us animated effects on the, I mean, it is animated, but it's pretty cool, like animated fire.
Yeah, it makes it sort of look like the fire is animated, but really all of the animation is just in the lighting effect, but it gives a nice sort of approximation of that. And like here in this kitchen, I think it looks really nice with sort of the flicker and the bloom of the torch on the map. I think it looks, very authentic for like a 2D top-down, battle map.
Outstanding.
So yeah, I think that new fire animation is really, really outstanding. And I can show it, maybe on a different scene as well. So like here's one with some like bigger sort of like bonfires.
Wow.
And so, yeah, it's a nice way.
Oh, that's great. I love it.
Yeah, it's a nice way to have the kind of appearance of fire in a way that you get that animated quality of your map. That is quite fun. So yeah.
Fantastic.
So yeah, those are some nice lighting effects that will be making it into V10. There probably will be some other lighting improvements as well. But one thing that isn't showing up here that I think is really fun to note is that we've unlocked a pretty major performance enhancement for lighting, even above and beyond the performance of the V9 lighting, which is already pretty good, because we were able to convert, this is a little bit technical, but we were able to convert an aspect of our shader approach to use a more directly computed geometry for the fragment shader, which is a lot more performant in rendering the region of the light than what we were previously doing, which involved rendering all lights as circles and then masking them down to their limited area of effect. So now we have a fragment shader that directly does the light source with its masked polygon. It removes the need for some extra computation and some extra layers of the rendering pipeline, and that has a nice spillover effect for performance. So these light sources in V10 are continuing to be faster and more performant. And you know, I do love my buttery smooth 120 FPS on my big scene with my snow animation and my light sources and all that. So
wow, I mean, V9 performance was such a boon. I remember when I first, you know, I was using very complicated scenes that really weren't even viable pre V9, and then all of a sudden in V9 they were buttery smooth. And if you're telling me that it's getting even better than that, then that's just even better news.
Well, we need to keep pushing the boundary there, because we want to buy ourselves headroom to add some new things that will have a performance cost.
Yeah.
Like for example, some of the things that I described with vision modes that we want to do, it's not free to do that. And so if we add that new feature for vision modes without adding something like this, then we're eating away at the performance of the application. And so I always like, you know, when we add something like advanced vision modes that's going to have a downward effect on frame rate, probably not huge. I mean, I think the performance is still going to be really good. I don't want to set off alarm bells, but I like offsetting that with something that makes performance better, so that we're not, you know, sliding or you know, hopefully we're coming out ahead on that. Yeah,
that's great.
Some other stuff that does have a sort of user facing, one thing you might notice, I don't know if my screen may be a bit too small for this, but there's some very nice tooltips that the software has now when you like hover over various controls.
Oh, okay.
Show like in a, you know, with an intelligently placed tooltip, what things do. This is part of a much larger initiative for us to continue improving the new user experience with the software. And so we have a much more elegant framework for tooltipping. And like everything we build in Foundry, this is based on an API framework that we ourselves are using, but that API framework is, of course, available to module developers to reuse. So we're making it really easy for module developers and system developers to add these exact same types of tooltips to anything that they create.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so there's some nice little, you know, UX implications of that. You know, for example, like here's a nice little UX tweak is, you know, sometimes you have a scene where the true name of the scene and the name you display in the navigation are different because you don't want to, you know, give away a spoiler. So now when a scene has that difference in naming for the GM, you can like see the true name on the tooltip of the scene to help you remember which one is the, you know, the bad one or something like that.
Love it.
So little refinements like that. And then more generally, as we're investing early in V10 with framework of new features, adding things like an API that all module developers can use to add this same type of tooltip to their enhancements is something that like we always try and add those foundational elements early on in a new release cycle, so that then developers have time to think about if they want to use them.
That's great. I've answered the same question 1,000 times about some basic, you know, functionality in Foundry. So any help in, you know, moving users and educating them in the UI and helping them on board is welcome.
Yeah, we agree with that. I think, that probably about does it with regards to, say, sorry about that background noise a little bit, but hopefully not too bad. That probably about does it with regards to like user-facing improvements that V10 prototype brings. We've got lots of things that we are working on, of course, but most of them are kind of more like back-end infrastructure and underlying cornerstones of what we're then going to be building on from here later throughout the V10 cycle. There's some very exciting, for example, like foundational work on data models and data schema and field definitions and data validation and things like that. But that probably doesn't make for good,
it sounds great. And I'm sure is going to enable a lot of amazing things. But I do appreciate you showing us some of the eye candy, because that is really something that drew me to Foundry from the beginning, is how much you pay attention to these effects and stuff that we get to use. Well, anything else that you want to pop in here before we tear the session down? And
well, I think maybe I can just give folks a little heads up on expected timelines. We're actually hoping to release our first prototype of V10 optimistically this Friday, although I think there's still a fair bit of chunk of work to do. So I think it might be early next week, but either way, I think the exciting news is that this first V10 prototype is actually going to be available very soon. Now, for folks who haven't necessarily weathered the turbulent, rocky terrain of a Foundry update cadence or an update cycle, I will caution you that the prototype release of a new version is very raw. It's going to have brand new features that are potentially somewhat unstable. It's definitely not safe for consumption, aside from satisfying your curiosity and doing a little bit of testing and seeing how the new features work, or maybe trying some new things out with the API. This isn't a release that people are encouraged to use for their games. And
I will second that. Don't, anyone listening to this, don't upgrade to this unless you really know what you're doing. And
it's really not something that we intend people to upgrade for to like use it, but it is something that we provide for very early feedback and testing.
That's great. Well, I'll let everyone know on my channel when I think it's safe to upgrade, and I'll be in here playing with this early and often. But I'm really excited about this. This is all really welcome stuff, and more in the vein of what we've come to expect. So Atropos, Andrew, thank you for doing what you do. Thank you for setting us up well for some really great experiences that we get to do with our players. And I guess that's it for today. Thanks for making the time to chat with us, and I'm looking forward to the new release and another year with Foundry.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks so much, Bailey. And thanks so much for all the cool things that you're creating that make our software look amazing for people to use and give them great opportunities to have memorable storytelling moments to explore with their friends and groups. And I encourage you to keep it up and keep pushing those boundaries and keep making some amazing environments for people to explore. And I can't wait to see what kinds of stuff you're showcasing when you are doing this type of video for your next big milestone. I think I expect things to continue improving and continuing just getting even more impressive. So I'm excited to see what that future holds.
Great. Well, it's my pleasure. And thanks again, Atropos. We'll talk to you soon. And everyone else, have fun with everything you learned and have fun making your maps.
All right. Cheers. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.